Valerie Flatus. Thank you. We're going to move to approval of meeting minutes. I am open to a motion.
So moved. Seconded.
All right, Kevin made a motion, Jason seconded. All in favor?
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, meeting minutes for January 6, 2024 have been approved. Our next meeting will be here in this room on the 3rd of March at 6:30 p.m. And at this time, I will open up the microphone, I should say, for any citizen comments or questions.
Go for it.
So, first and foremost, I want to just bear with me because I have a disability, so I want you guys to just bear with me because I sometimes stumble over my words and, have a hard time speaking.
May I ask your name, please?
My name is Chanel Hill,
And do you live or work in South Salt Lake?
in Salt Lake, yeah.
Okay.
So today I'd like to bring to your attention, Chief Danielle Croyle of South Salt Lake emphasizes transparency, respect, unity, service, teamwork, and policing. This is on the very own website. However, transparency in South Salt Lake and across Utah is compromised with state officials like our former Attorney General Sean Reyes supports individuals like Tim Ballard, a man accused of allegedly molesting women using his 501c3 status nonprofit, Operation Underground Railroad, as a front for trafficking. Instead of protecting victims, Reyes promoted and defended Ballard. Despite overwhelming evidence of abuse, fraud, and exploitation of vulnerable people in multiple countries, South Salt Lake cannot ignore these issues. As religious organizations and figures operating within Utah have repeatedly abused their power, like the case of Ruby Franke and Jody Hildebrandt, is a chilling example. Franke, the Utah-based family blogger, and Hildebrandt, a self-proclaimed Mormon therapist, used their positions of influence to justify severe child abuse and psychological control, revealing how religious institutions can shield abusers from scrutiny until it's too late. We see these patterns right here in South Salt Lake, where churches and religious groups are often operate with a little exploitation, child abuse, and trafficking can go unnoticed. The city's police department has the power to change this by fully committing to transparency, proactive investigations into the religious organizations engaging in illegal activities. My organization, Stand Against Fear and Exploitation, exists to fight against the religious institutions and individuals who use faith as a shield for abuse. We advocate for stronger investigations into religious organizations operating in South Salt Lake. Legislative changes to prevent nonprofits from being used for trafficking and exploitation. Support victims of religious abuse, harassment, and fair gaming tactics. South Salt Lake law enforcement has a responsibility to uphold truth, transparency, protect the community from individuals and organizations hiding behind the faith hiding behind their faith to commit crimes. We truly believe in service, unity, and teamwork. We must defend accountability at every level, starting with stronger protections for those being exploited, right in our city, and it starts with our police.
Thank you.
Good evening, board. Can you hear me? Yes, hi. I'm Barry from Film the Police USA, and I'm here to talk about a couple different items. And I just want to start off first by saying that I appreciate the fact that your board actually has a virtual option to attend a meeting. I travel across pretty much every state in America, and I do this quite a bit. I attend various police accountability boards. I've done a lot of cop watching, and I just want to say I commend your board. It's very rare, in fact, across America that you have accessible means to access what your government is doing. And I find it kind of strange, there's a fancy quote that goes something along the lines of, when you see these signs on courtrooms and even some of your own here in South Salt Lake, the public areas where people go to interact with the police at the precincts, and you see signs that say you can't record. Some might say that's policy. I would call that a mark of corruption. But in any case, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, now that I have given credit where credit is due, I find it strange that even still in South Salt Lake today, a full list of staff roster, for some reason, is beyond the grasp of what South Salt Lake and even Salt Lake County overall sees as public record. And I don't quite understand why that would be not the case. After all, our government officials, especially our police force, are they not public servants? Do we not have the right to know what our government is up to? Especially when we have access very clearly not only to their salaries, but the entire roster of who these folks are. And I would extend that same offer to the sheriff's department as well. And so far, really, the only transparency tool I see in the state of Utah is actually a completely separate non-government backed project by a group of grassroots civilians called COP-DB. That's COP, D like Delta, B like Bravo. And it lists, in fact, a whole roster of every, at least known from released public records, officers from the greater Salt Lake City and county overall. And yet in South Salt Lake, that there's about, from what I last saw, about 135 to 137 officers, and about 40 to 60 of them do not have a photo displayed. And frankly, I've heard all the arguments. Officer safety. Officer safety of what? I've actually worked in aerospace and defense. I've had a security government clearance, and LinkedIn has my information. What was the excuse for officer safety? It's such a tried and old, fallback. It's just utterly ridiculous. And I hope, I would imagine this board stands for transparency and accountability, especially in our government operations. And part of that is releasing how much these officers make, especially in overtime and health and benefits, including the names and the badge numbers and the photos of who these guys are. I have far less privacy as a private citizen than some of your very own officers do, who many of them are just regular beat officers. They're not involved in any particular gang crimes or sex trafficking crimes units. It's, again, I would call that a mark of corruption. Some would call that policy. The other thing I want to talk to you about today, it's been heavily on the news. It's regarding which, interestingly enough, your own offices and even the local media here won't even release the name of the officers involved in the clear and brutal death of Miss Megan Moan, who essentially was having a 5150 episode, and rather than giving her the proper due diligence and just simple dignity of treating her as a normal person, it was literally a repeat of what happened with George Floyd. Here we have a woman in crisis, and one of those officers, Officer Hoyle, who I know unfortunately all too well, as he constantly berates and harasses activists who I've seen over in the Salt Lake City area protesting out by the LDS church buildings and the Scientology buildings. And the person you just heard is one of those activists who's been harassed by Officer Hoyle. Well, Officer Hoyle is actually one of the officers involved in Megan Moan's death. Is that a coincidence, I ask you, that that same officer is out there being called upon by dispatch, and I know because I have the audio recordings of the cat calls over frivolous calls alleging that these activists are being criminals or making death threats, and they're not. Is it any coincidence that the same cop who your own DA refused to prosecute when the body cam footage is so damning that this guy was so clearly involved in unjustly taking away a life and excessive force? Is it any coincidence that you have the same corrupt cop showing up and harassing this activist? I would say that's a mark of corruption. Some would say they're following policy. I just leave you with these thoughts. And again, if you have any questions for me, I can be reached at filmthepoliceusa@protonmail.com. I appreciate the time to speak to you here. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I would like to add one thing. The case of Megan Moan falls under the Salt Lake Police Department. This board covers the South Salt Lake Police Department. Unfortunately, it is beyond our scope of review. We do try to be as transparent as possible with regard to our department and the work that we do, but in transparency, the case of Megan Moan is beyond this board, and we have chosen not to speak on it because it is beyond our purview. And try to keep local, work local. Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we will move on to board member comments.
Me tonight.
No,
Yes, you had something.
The department has done a great job of working through a bunch of cases and giving them to us. But that does mean like throughout January, we've seen a lot more at it. So try to get in there if you can get the full backlog, focus on things that maybe only have one or zero reviewers already done, so we can get at least one or two eyes on everything in the next couple of weeks. I know I'm one of the guilty parties, but there's a lot in there. So
Well, on that note, I would also like to propose to the board that we look at having a second meeting in March to help get caught up on some of these cases. So I will put that on March 3rd's calendar, just to be aware that it will be coming.
yeah, we begin like 2 weeks after that, so March 16th. I think that makes sense.
Try to do it so
First
that
and
we've got a little bit in between.
Well, we're going to your CRB meeting.
Don't forget to get your ride-alongs in. Yes, it's February, I know, but I don't want to be waiting to December and having to keep bothering you about it, so. I would like to take a moment of personal privilege. I would like to congratulate Ariel Andres on receiving the Chiefs Award of Excellence. So thank you for all of your hard work. All right, moving on to action items. We have discussion and possible vote on amending the Civilian Review Board standing rules. It's actually page 3 instead of page 2. Oh no, it is page 2. This is a completely new section having to do with recording of this body and what we do, and having it put into the record. So it's really just statutory as opposed to something that you all need to do on a regular basis. Is there any discussion?
Oh, I think we're already recorded parts.
We are, I'm just covering all of our bases.
Yep.
And to clarify for our guests, this is the open part of the meetings. When we discuss individual officers, that's in closed session as per state law.
Motion to pass as drafted.
Second?
First, and Kevin with the second. Roll call vote on my left, please.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And yes. All right. The other vote that we have is the fourth quarter report to be presented to City Council. Are there any questions or suggestions for changing before we vote on this one? Because I will be taking it to the next City Council meeting. I changed the ones that you suggested. I did leave one on here where recommendations are pending. We'll vote on that in the next meeting, and I'll put that one in the year-end review. So, all right, I am open for a motion to vote.
So moved.
Seconded.
I have a first from 20, Jason has a second
Yes.
also. All right, so we're moving into closed meeting pursuant to Utah Code annotated 1953 as amended, section 52.4 at C,
Wait for it.
for the following purposes.
Spell
Discussion
That'll
of
wait.
character and professional competence, physical or mental health of an individual.
So moved. Second.
So I have a first from Kevin, and I have a second from Conrad. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right.
Alright, that's that. Fuck out.
Recording stopped.
So this is what I mean. This is exactly the kind of thing I mean, where you have a closed session to review what? To review what? To review the behavior of cops.
Of cops.
Who are what? Cops are what? Cops are public servants. And the fact of the matter is, this is exactly the mark of corruption. Why is it that the behavior and disciplinary hearings of cops is being held under private session, where you have 7 appointed, not even elected, appointed by a mayor, and you have, and the audacity to even call it a civilian review board is just disgusting. Those are not civilians. Those are, yes,
So aren't they all civilians on there?
they are government appointed officials. They do not if anything, they have to some level of representation is through indirectly via the mayor's election. But the fact of the matter is you have 7 hand-picked folks. There is no sort of way that the public can directly impact their operations.
So how do other review boards?
They are not government funded at all. They are literally volunteer-based.
Yeah.
And they're given power through, a lot of the times they sue the crap out of the city. And they're given official legislative power with real authority, where they can prosecute officers. State.
The state. Yeah. So
State.
that I don't know. Does the state of Utah have anything set up in legislation
No.
to do that? No.
No,
Yeah.
it's literally
How many states
nothing.
do?
So believe it or not, as corrupt as LA is, California, especially in the LA area, does. It's run exactly just like that.
That officer you were talking about, is he a
Hoyle?
Salt Lake? Yeah.
He's
Hoyle.
Salt Lake
Yeah.
City proper. Yeah, it's a U77 is his badge number. And he was directly, I mean, it was clear as day on that website, CopDB. You can go and search. It has a whole roster of
You
every,
can search his name.
yeah, at
and
least
then
the,
it'll bring
the
up-
roster of officers up to the time that they made a public records, which is usually like mid-year that they'll release them. And oftentimes it's not really released.
Is he like a tenured police officer? Has he been there?
He's been around
years?
he's been around for a while. If
Yeah,
I
he's-
remember.
He's been around for a while, and he used to be like a sergeant, and then he got demoted, and,
Yeah.
you know, now he's,
He-
but he's
climbing
still,
back through
but
the-
he's still been on the force, but he's still getting sergeant pay.
Yes.
Mm.
So if he's a sergeant, why is he still getting had to pay if he was
If you're demoted, your
Like,
salary should go down.
why are we
Yes.
still paying you that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just,
But he's still a beat cop too. It's not like he's still out on the streets.
yeah.
Right.
And about November 2nd, there was a run-in where he literally went. It was the same behavior you saw during the Megan Moan incident. He was just
How
outright
long ago was that incident?
That incident
like
was
2
3
years,
years ago.
2 or 3, yeah,
Yeah, it
2
was
3
3
years
years
ago.
ago, and it took, you know, the
What-
DA 3
Was it a
years.
knee on the neck? I mean, was it restraining that?
Yes.
Well, yeah, he
Yeah.
had like both
Literally
of his
like
knees on the back of it.
this, like one-to-one
If you
with
look
George
up-
Floyd.
Sam Gill didn't do anything
No.
about it?
So they
Of course
made
he
a
did,
press statement that they basically found no evidence of wrongdoing. It's the same type of language you hear released from IA to say we investigated ourselves
Is there a way to go around?
by law and not rely on just your, because criminally that's basically, a lot of people don't understand that when this phraseology of I'm going to press charges, really what you're saying is I hope to God that whatever got owned, just
Yeah.
like IA does not hold, it's like HR, they're not there to protect the interests of the police officers, to make sure
Yeah.
they don't face any repercussions.
How big is your organization?
I'm not part of one, I just,
That.
yeah,
I have about 1,400.
Interesting. That's an eye
But
opener.
Yeah.
if you go to CopDB, you can look up Hoyle, and
the only inkling you can actually see of who's there is this, literally see a
Otherwise you see,
knee
like-
dreams of Megan.
Yeah.
But because there's to Sim Gill's office, and at first, you know, because I didn't, yeah,
That would be Aaron Mendenhall.
do these things is I'll reach out nicely at first, formally over email. When I get ignored during their public office hours, I just go in and I just confront them because I mean they're supposed to take this public feedback anyway, and I'm not an asshole. These people,
Yeah, yeah, no.
I approach them. I just
It was very.
yeah, like I don't. There's no threats. Just very straight to the point. You know, this is your job. It's very clear. This information is literally on video, accessible to the entire public.
Is this what you do full time, or do you have a?
No, and funny enough, the cohort of people that made the public website of CopDB are also a small cohort of software. Think of it like a
So-
YouTube specifically for
Right.
cop interactions in
So
Utah.
where did your request go?
Yeah.
First it was hello, and then immediately, as soon as I got to, I wanted to talk to them about
So they're civilians. They don't have government jobs, but
they have, this is their full-time job. They're appointed to this. They have other duties at meetings that they hold that's open to the public once a month. But outside of this, they have daily, like 9 to 5 government operational.
See, I didn't. So to let you know why I'm here. I'm a Democratic delegate, so
Oh, okay.
I've helped some of the folks get elected, like Nate Bloom and Sahara Hayes.
Mhm.
And there was a meeting with Sahara Hayes that I went to at a coffee shop, and Mayor Cherie Wood was there. And I was just sort of expressing, you know, we were talking about current legislation, and I asked them if they didn't mind me going to a dark place, and that's due to what we're facing right now on
Absolutely.
a national level.
Sure.
Right, and the overall threat to our Constitution and to our democracy. And so I sort of shared my viewpoints on that, basically saying, what are we prepared to do on a national level to organize if we have to,
Mhm.
right? If I mean, that's what you have to do sometimes in order to save the
I
democracy.
agree.
You have
Yeah.
to
I
organize
agree.
and fight back. And a few folks had some leads to some websites that are starting to talk about this.
Mhm.
Right? But where I'm going with this is that after that meeting, Mayor Sheree Wood came up to me and asked if I'd be interested in being an alternate.
Oh, for this,
review board.
sure.
Yeah.
I personally have nothing against boards like this, right? I honestly want to see more of them because
Yeah, there's only 4 of these. in the state
literally,
of
yes.
Utah.
So I'm not trashing the board for its existence. I'm trashing the fact that they have a lot of power and authority, and then you start throwing their weight around with it
And how.
and making it public.
And when
Yeah.
they say civilian review board, it gives off a completely different, because
Yeah.
if you think of civilian review board, like these civilians went out and they did their own, like, in the community.
They had no affiliation with the
Correct.
mayor.
They don't,
Like
yeah.
in Rochester, New
But-
York, from where I'm from, literally it's a mix of, and they're not paid, it's mental health counselors, teachers, local tradespeople, and they constitute the civilian review.
See,
It's a
'cause
proper,
Doing that interview process I had with them, it didn't sound like, for example, Joy, who was she did all the
Talking.
talking, yeah, she was running the meeting tonight. She's not, she told me she's not a full-time employee. I said, is anybody in here? And they said no, and they were like, yeah, you would come to this once a month. You have access to Google shared documents to review police reports that might be in question. And there was a small $75 stipend, so, for going to the meeting. So I don't know, that sort of told me like, okay, it's not a paid position, it's really, somebody's interested in doing civic duty.
it could, yeah, I very well might have butchered it. From my understanding and from what I read
Yeah, it
on the
was
articles,
online.
yeah,
And being appointed by the mayor, that's not, that, to me, that's not.
So I think the mayor will pick a candidate, but then in order for me to have this finalized, I just have to come and meet before the Salt Lake Council. And,
city council proper,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
okay.
South Salt Lake.
Salt Lake, okay,
Yeah.
not Maine, okay.
And if they review my resume and any notes that the mayor took along with Joy during the interview, just talking to Joy, she seemed like she's someone who's really committed to righting the
Well,
wrongs.
they seem like they're paying attention, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah,
a lot better, than most.
But I
boards.
have a friend who's a captain in the fire department for Salt Lake proper, and I told him what I was doing, and he's like, I think that's great, but just give you a heads up. They're, the fellow city employees, their take on Sam Gill is not good when it comes to pursuing any wrongdoings.
Yeah.
I don't think he's ever pursued an officer, to be honest.
I thought he had
Very-
at least done 2 or 3 cases. that-
Maybe.
Yeah.
But you know how long he's been? 20 years.
Yeah, he's
So,
a lifer.
Only 2 or 3 in 20 years.
Right.
We've had a hell of a lot more than that, And we're gonna get right back into this, Attorney General Sean Ray is bullshit,
Right.
Yeah,
that guy, yeah.
But-
I mean, that seems like just a blatant display of supporting someone who is not qualified for that position.
Yeah,
the interesting part is some of the other undertones, Project Underground Railroad is what we call an AstroTurf front group. It's one of the many nonprofits that's very well known to be connected to basically be the very same bad actors that they're claiming that they're helping suppress. And I'm sure you've seen this, but in the nonprofit world, not all of them, but there's definitely a theme whereby it's very easy to do criminal acts like launder money, like hide
Sure.
criminal activity behind this veil of, do-gooderness. And unfortunately, Project Underground Railroad is one of those nonprofits that's tied to some of the known human trafficking by cults like Scientology. And
Well, and then he split off from Underground Railroad, and Tim Ballard just opened up his own. What the heck?
Tim Ballard. Is he the one that started that
Underground Railroad?
Yes.
Where does he call?
Here,
Oh,
Salt
he's
Lake
in-
City.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's here in Salt Lake City. Celeste Boyd was one of his,
Well, what's his? Was he a former police officer? Tim?
no,
No.
he worked handed a lot of the.
I think
the-
he's been a prosecutor for his whole life. I can't.
I think he was a
Oh.
prosecutor at one point in time, or he did have some, but he worked, under,
Raising and we all know the abuse the Catholic
Yeah.
Church. has
Yeah.
done
Oh,
over the
yeah.
years.
but it's the criminal acts that they do behind the religious status.
Right.
And that 501c3. And if any
Yeah,
police
that-
officer walks up to the door and, let's say Henry gets,
Is that your first name?
Yep.
run up an LDS church. And the guy that assaulted him runs into the church. If the cops walk up to that church and say, you have, John in here and he assaulted, this guy out
The
here.
church can give him sanctuary.
Yeah, the church can tell him no.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I think that separate the reason you would go there for sanctuary.
But
right?
no, that's the thing.
Yeah, so
It's-
once they revoke that as a place of sanctuary, it doesn't matter who goes in there. You're no longer going to be protected by that
But that's
entity.
their religion. They can say, the
We have a
church can
certain
tell them-
faith
Yeah.
through
The church
practice.
can tell them no. And not
Hmm,
go past
yeah,
those doors.
I
Yeah.
don't know. What's
It's
the name of
careful.
your organization?
Stand Against Fear and Exploitation. And that's what we're here,
So have you
like-
guys talked before in front of these folks?
Not this is my
No.
first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just came to Salt Lake in less than a week ago. I was here before,
Where do you
but
call home?
over on the East Coast in Rochester.
Right, oh, that's right.
Upstate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's the thing is, like, I have a 501c4 and to make change against these religious entities. We're using their status, their 501c3 and their religion status
Yeah.
to stop the
That kind
the
of-
enforcement. They're stopping the enforcement.
Yeah.
No, if they're doing something criminal, the cops should be able to go in
Oh,
and
yeah.
say, hey, you just essayed this child,
Yeah,
let's
yeah,
go.
yeah,
But they
a church should
can't.
be treated like an embassy.
But they can't.
Yeah.
And, I sent a policy over to Salt Lake City Council to hold 501c3s accountable, all of them.
And how did that go?
So far, it's done good. I'm gonna go report back to them tomorrow, and I'm gonna say, okay, well, look, now you've got, Sean Reyes, he's shit, and he turned around and he, did another 501c3. He
Is there a paper trail of all that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's people sure I got it
Yeah.
all.
And that's the thing too, right? When you call yourself a tax exempt entity, really what you're saying is your God is the state.
Yeah.
And what's beautiful about that is when you get into these scenarios of where clear history of not paying taxes that are owed, that's great for prosecution because you can go after them for that.
Right. Well, we've seen, especially on the evangelical side of things, leading up to this election,
Right.
we saw that a lot of religious entities leading that political policy
Yep.
advocacy in the church place. And if somebody was actually enforcing the letter of the law, a lot of the churches would
Absolutely.
have had that.
Well, and see, and
That
that's the
enough.
thing is my policy, it holds every 501c3 accountable And right now, I can tell you almost every 501c3 in Salt Lake County.
So this is a piece this is wording that you would like to see somebody take up as legislation?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, I literally, like, I have a bill wrote at home. I have a bill wrote for the religious entities, the 501c3s. I have,
It's
have,
the right thing to do, but good luck doing that
Yeah.
in this state.
hey,
okay?
So some part of
I
that
mean,
too, you know.
It's-
I'm very persistent. I will,
That's what
I mean,
it's
you know,
Yeah.
until some-
yeah.
and you're gonna need a Republican to take it up and a Democrat.
Well, it all depends. I mean, honestly, if you think about it, like, you never know, because it all depends on how you explain it to the Democrats. I'm saying, like,
Yeah, but in this state for what Democrats do in this
most of
state,
the
they
Republicans
have,
are run.
they have the legislation
Mhm.
and they want to see it move, so they'll offer it up to a Republican representative to take up because of the overwhelming disproportionate scale of LDS and Republican versus
Yeah.
Democrats
Yeah.
in the House and Senate.
Yeah.
Or just
Utah's
the-
very interesting in that way, you
Yeah.
know. It's
That's how the Democrats get policy passed here.
Yeah.
They come up with the legislation, they find a colleague, the GOP labels a sponsor, and then let that colleague run with it in committees. And-
all right, I tell her is a lot of improper civil suits, and essentially what the courts uphold becomes the law, because regardless of what the letter of the law is, really oftentimes it's what's upheld in courts.
Right.
So you can file crap with little small, you know, Title 42 claims and whatnot, and just keep hammering it out.
I noticed on that sign sheet, there
Yeah. Yeah.